another book review. We are going to talk about the book The Vampire Prophecy. Yes, it's another Devisa book. I am actually falling in love with her style of writing. Just to start out, this book is 3 books in one. It's The Dark Fates, Dark Divide, and Dark Oblivion. I didn't realize that when I bought it. I was just thumbing through, honestly, suggestions. And I really love the synopsis of this book. It kind of drew me in. Of course, it's a love story. It's a tug-of-war love story, which is what I've been kind of attracted to lately, oddly enough. But this basically follows the crazy romance of Solaris and Kaige. Kaige, without giving spoilers, is part of the royal family of Draconis. And then Solaris is like, I want to say young adult, in the city called Imera. I think I'm pronouncing that right. To sum it up, they basically meet on the chance of fate. One of Solaris's rebellious acts lands her in the forbidden area of Draconis, where she runs into Kaige pure randomly. Like, it realistically could have been anyone, but it was them. So they basically meet, which is forbidden based off of the prophecy that apparently if a human and, you guessed it, a vampire meet, the world's gonna end. Basically, if they come in contact with each other, the world is gonna end, pure and simple. So their meeting, which is not love at first sight, it is anger, fighting, confusion, kidnapping, a whole bunch of stuff that leads them into a romance. That's the best way I could sum it up without giving spoilers. To be completely honest, the beginning, which is the first book, as always, it was a bit slow, but not as slow as, like, to the point where I was like, I don't want to read it. It was more of less like, when you look at a cover and you read the title and the synopsis, you know something like climatic is gonna happen. Well, reading this book, I was kind of like, okay, get on with it. I know something's coming, just get on with it. Well, how she wrote the book, once the climax happened, it was not what I expected, which had me, from that point, eager to see what happens next. Because how she paints the story of both of their lives separately and how their lives start to commingle together, you have this idea, oh, well, of course, this is going to happen, so let's see, get on with it going to happen, so that way I can see how they handle it. But then once the climax happens, I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that to happen. I was expecting something completely different. So, and then how she ends the first book, it's indeed cliffhanger, which a lot of authors are really good at doing. And it had me like, okay, I have to see what happens next. The only thing I don't like is what a lot of writers do is when they end one book, they start off the next book either a couple weeks or a couple days ahead. I prefer a book, personally, if you end it with Sally lost in the woods, the second book should pick up with Sally lost in the woods. Not a couple days later, a couple months later, or years later. That's kind of what she does. She doesn't do like years of or anything. She just does like at least a couple days or a week. So I'm like, well, what happened in those days? Because how it ended, you're sitting there like, she does try to repair it through the beginning of the second book, where she's kind of filling in the details. But I'm like, why? You wouldn't have to fill in the details if you would have just started exactly where you left off and then just continued. She does that with the third book as well, where it's kind of like, she's filling in the blanks. That's just my preference. Some people like it where you kind of fast forward ahead, get to the nitty gritty. I don't, in regards to if you're going to do a series. Now, in regards to the storyline, she does give closure, which I love it when a series gives closure. I feel like she answers a lot of questions that I had, to the point where she didn't need to spin off anything. I don't like tedious or ridiculous spin-offs when they don't need to. If I have a question about a character or a certain character, I don't need a whole spin-off to describe or explain things. All of the characters that are introduced are thoroughly introduced to the point where, again, I didn't have any questions about them. From Solaris' side, because how she describes these characters, like, you get to meet the Draconis world through Kaige's eyes and understand how his world goes, and then you have Solaris' side, which is Imera, and you understand thoroughly how her side goes. And then you have the middle ground, which is the Shadowlands. You don't really understand anything about that to the third book. Rightfully so, because, I mean, there's no character there that you need, to kind of bridge them all together, if that makes sense. So, because, again, it's based about Kaige and Solaris and their worlds meeting and commingling, and what happens when basically this prophecy comes true in regards to a human and a vampire meeting. And then the whole book tells about what, like, will the prophecy come true? Will it not come true? What exactly is the true meaning of this prophecy? Is the world really going to end? Is it not going to end? Is it going to end in a weird way? Is it going to end painfully? Is it going to end, like, the third book is full of just action and chaos, which is, again, I went through the third book within 2 days. First book, it took me a while. Second book, I blazed through it within a day, because, again, the second book is where just happens, if that makes any sense. But like I was saying, she did a really good job with describing fully, Kaige's world, and how his world is so different from, Solaris' world. And honestly, just how she paints a picture of their interactions, where you can see, wow, this place is totally different than this place. Whereas, they're just like he's 18, she's 17. But yeah, their worlds could not be like night and day. Literally, they're so different. Even though maybe realistically they're 30 miles apart. But yet, one city and another city are just completely different, to the point where you're like, wow, they're a year apart, but yet their worlds and their upbringings have been so different. And just the little sprinkle of, DeRosa's version of a vampire. I say that because so many people write about vampires, but they give their own spin. Like Twilight had the whole glitter effect. What's another? Was it Vampire Diaries had their own? If they wore a ring, they can go into the sunlight. I like DeRosa's version of vampires because, and I love how she explains it. It's not just a ring or it's just glitter. She explains how this version of vampire, their inner workings and why it's like this. And she even gives some history of, well, this is how it was before, the world we have now. There was an old way, and now there's a new way, and this is why we do things a new way, to sit there and save the old way. Everything that she introduces in the book, she explains it to the point where you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, and then you keep reading. So it's like she expects you to have questions, and she answers them like with a great explanation where you're just like, okay, that makes sense. I had a question, now I don't have to research it or try to figure out what you mean by that. I would definitely recommend this book. I love books also where the series is in, like, it's a complete section, instead of having to go, oh, I have to go buy this book, I have to go buy this book, I have to go buy the next book. I love when it's released in a chunk like this, so that way you have it all together, and when you're ready to just keep going, you can keep going. You're not sitting there waiting for it to be shipped. You're not having to go through the story. You're just like, oh, I can just turn the page and keep going. So I was really happy that I bought it in this way. I was also happy that I bought it as a hardcover because it was a definite page turner. Sometimes whenever, you're really into a good book and you're reading, and you have it on a Kindle or a tablet or something like that, it dies on you. Then you have to wait for it to charge. And then you're sitting there on pins and needles like, what happened next? So, yeah. From my knowledge, there aren't any spin-offs about their story. Like I said, how it ended, it summed up what, the future for these worlds has. Again, I'm telling it without giving any spoilers because I really hope I'm influencing you to pick up this book. Because it really is. I wouldn't have heard of it if I hadn't read my other DeRosa book. But she's a very, very, very good author. I don't know if many people know about her. I'm just learning about her. But out of the books I've read since this whole pandemic's happened, this one was the best based off of just her writing style and how well she just painted that picture. Like, I felt like I was there, from the sense to describing the environment to describing the feelings of the person, that through the person's perspective. She also does that. This book is definitely each chapter is per perspective. It only describes Kaige and Solaris's. Like, one chapter it'll be Solaris and from her point of view and her words. Then the next one will be Kaige, with his point of view. And I think that's a great way because when you're flashing to different worlds, you can't just give like a narrative, like a first person narrative. You have to give that whole, okay, if I'm in Draconis, it needs to be from Kaige's point of view. If I'm in Imera, it needs to be from Solaris' point of view. When they're together, you can bounce back and forth. Even when they're together, she really does a great mixing them. And then you have, whenever they're apart, she has a great way of describing them separately. Another thing that I really enjoyed, even though it's, Kaige, Solaris, Kaige, Solaris, Kaige, Solaris, I feel like there's no points missing in the story, if that makes sense. Like, it keeps the timeline running smoothly. So even if, like, on Monday, we're talking about Draconis, the next chapter, it's Monday, Solaris. It's not like Monday with Kaige, Tuesday with Solaris. No, she really does a great way. She really does great with keeping the timeline flowing. So you feel like you don't miss anything. What else can I say about the book? It was also nice with just dealing with one creature. A lot of books nowadays, at least since I've started back reading, I've noticed a lot of books nowadays tend to, if you're going to include vampires, you have to include witches, you have to include fairies, you have to include this, you have to include that, you have to include werewolves. You can't have a vampire world without other creatures. No, this world is just vampires and humans. And with just vampires and humans, it was enough. Because I like how, even though it was just humans and vampires, they had, the royal vampires, they had the poor vampires, they had the middle class vampires. And then on Solaris' side, you had, the high-ranking humans, the middle-ranking humans, the teenage humans, the rebellious ones, the ones that, are on the verge of this and that. But, I'm trying so hard not to spoil it for you guys. But it's like, there's a lot of layers to it. What I read from the synopsis pulled me in, but what I got was so much more. There's so much more than just, oh, we're going to talk about the brewing love of Solaris and Kaige. No, there's a lot of, you know, mystery. There's a lot of adventure. There's a lot of just nothing meets the eye. It's very much like Clip. There we go. You sit there and you think, oh, the butler did it, or oh, Mrs. Peacock did it. But no, it was somebody completely different. And that's what this book is. You're thinking, oh, it's just going to be about, you know, teenagers in love. No, a lot of stuff happens. A lot of stuff happens that affects them, but it has nothing to do with them. And the way she writes it, it's in such a good way where you're like, okay, I want to find out if they do fall in love or not, but whoa, what's going on over there? Why is this happening? How does this involve them? You know, and you want to keep reading to figure it out. So that's where that ended up happening. But again, the book is called The Vampire Prophecy by G.K. DeRosa. If you can't find it researching it that way, then just look up them individually. Dark Fates, Dark Divide, Dark Oblivion. I got my copy off of Amazon, so I'm 90% sure if you type in The Vampire Prophecy DeRosa, it'll come up in this way. But if you can't find it for some odd reason off Amazon, then just look it up individually as Dark Fates, as The Vampire Prophecy Book 1 and all that stuff. Again, I hope this influences you to read the book, or if you were on the fence about it, I hope this influences you to make a decision. If you are a fan of DeRosa's writings, me too. I'm a growing fan, and I can't wait to honestly read more of her books. So, as always, I hope you subscribe, and I hope you keep reading. Thanks for watching.